Have you always fancied creating your own character or unit but lack those sculpting skills? Well then this Kitbash video is for you. Whether that is a simple head swap or a little bit more of a complex mashup, I've got you covered. I'm Peachy and this is Peachy Tips. So Trench Crusade seems quite popular at the moment. It seems to be the new hotness. Now, I've been aware of it. It's been on my peripherals for a little while, but it wasn't until quite recently that myself, Louise and Rob were discussing about it on an episode of our podcast called Jugs. And that's when I started to find a little bit more information about it and got a little bit more excited. Now, the great thing with Trench Crusade is they're making their own models. They've got some rules you can look at the moment. There's loads of cool art in the playtest rules. I've been having a good read of those. It's awesome. It's model agnostic, so there's no sort of like buy into you must use these figures, which I really like, but they've got some amazing looking figures, so they are worth looking at. At the moment, they're STLs. There's no physical ones at the moment unless you can print them yourselves. We don't all have printers. I mean, I am lucky enough to have one, but I'm not really using that much at the moment. But I also like kit bashing, and that's kind of the purpose of this video, is combining kit bashing, the skills that you need for that, and also make some stuff for Trench Crusade, because I kind of want to give that a go as well. Now, there's a whole bunch of factions to pick from. So whether you want your factions to be more holy warriors fighting against demons and hellish creatures spat from Satan's abode, or you want to play with them, it's entirely up to you. So there's a whole choice of factions. There is a rule book available at the moment, a playtest rule that has all these factions listed, and it also shows you the forces you can build your warbands. It is a warband, so it's very heavily leaning into Mordheim, written by Thomas Pirinen, who also wrote Mordheim all those many years ago, 25 years, I believe. So himself and a bunch of others, some amazing sculptors, have come up with this grim, dark World War One-esque World War Two meets medieval sort of setting. And it looks really cool. The models look really good. As I've said numerous times, I do want to get some of the models as well because I quite like the aesthetic of them. They kind of feel a bit, some of them certainly feel a bit like elements of Sisters of Battle, World War One, Knights, all mashed together, and then you've got like chaosy looking baddies and weird undead looking things, and just meat monsters is another way to describe it. Now, I'm just going to quickly interrupt this kitbashing video and mention that I'm going to be using this video to help fundraise towards Jingle Jam and the charity CALM, which is a campaign against living miserably. Lots of worthwhile charities are being supported through Jingle Jam, whether that's suicide prevention, mental health, autism, or just protecting and supporting children in war zones. So all great stuff. Now it goes on for 2 weeks. It's the 1st of December to the 14th of December. Lots of cool events. So check out Yogscast, the guys that do games night. They've got loads of stuff going off. On the 10th, Jordan Sorcery is also doing a Quizhammer, which I'm involved in. Very much looking forward to that. So check that out on the evening. He's live streaming that. And then on the 13th, which is getting close to concluding Jingle Jam, they're going to do a Warhammer content live stream. And in that, there's going to be a prize draw. I'm going to put all the links in the description as well. So do check that out. But it's going to be a great night of live streaming with lots of great people. Don't know why they asked me, but I'm going to be there for a little while. I think, if memory serves, again, do check the link. It's going to be 1 p.m. till 4 p.m. and that's Greenwich Mean Time. So if you are in the States, you can get it on the VODs, I imagine, because it is a live stream. Now, I am also going to make sure I donate all my ad revenue, any super gifts, and there's also going to be a fundraising link as well, so do go to that if you do feel like you want to donate some stuff to worthwhile charities. But also the models that I'm going to build in this video, I'm going to put for auction on eBay, so there'll be a link for that as well. I will also pin them as comments with all these links, so 2 places to see them. But what I'm going to say is, don't normally do this as a thing. I'm not interested in the views, but do watch the ads because that revenue will go to charity. 100%. I know it's boring. I know they're ads. I know they're not the most exciting ones in the world, but make a cuppa, put your fingers in your ears, put some base coats on, just watch the ads. That's all I'm asking. This once. I mean, some of you do anyway, because you're amazing people. But yes, all for charity. Anyway, I'm now going to go off and carry on doing some kit bashing for Trench Crusade. Now, I like kit bashing. Big fan of smashing some kits together. It's quite straightforward. It's not as wizardry as you might think. I always suggest starting off quite straightforward. Just do a simple head swap. You don't have to overcomplicate it. And that's the great thing. You can get some really good things from a simple head swap. Check out the Ventrili Nobles, my iconic kit bash, if you like. Granted, a little bit of a paint solution also helped with that, but that is just Empire heads on Cadian bodies, and that became a thing. And that was just a simple head swap. Yes, granted, some of the other bits I did like some swords here and there, maybe swap some hands over, but that's because I kind of got more into like the idea and ethos of that. And that's kind of, I guess, when it comes to kitbashing, where it goes. You start off with a simple head swap, and then you go, well, you know what? I might just swap his arm. Or you know what? I might just take that hand out and replace that hand with this hand. And then before you know it, you're a kitbashing expert, and you can just do anything. You can look at kits like it's the Matrix and go, yep, I can mix those two bits together. Even now, when I do my kitbashes, I do screw up. I do try things and I'm like, that seemed all right in my head, but actually the reality of it is very different. Sometimes it depends on the head fittings or the arm fittings. Luckily, a lot of all these kits I've got, like the historical stuff, they usually have very similar arm fittings and usually have very similar head fittings, which is perfect. So if you look at Victrix kits, Wargames Atlantic, Perry's, Warlord, they all have very similar arm fittings. Some of the heads are slightly different. Some have little ball sockets and some have like almost like a chunk taken out of it because the heads are different fitting. But that's not necessarily bad because you can always just fill that gap or that void. So the heads probably end up being the most challenging part of that straightforward thing, and it's not that challenging really in the grand scheme of things. So keep it simple, I think, when you're first starting doing kitbashing, and just do some simple head swaps. Now, in this video, I'm going to cover a few things like head swaps, and then I'm going to mash two kits together. So when I come around to doing some shock troopers or heavily armoured yeomanry, I've not decided yet. That is using two separate kits. That's going to use some Agincourt foot knights, and I'm going to mix that with some World War II Ranger arms and maybe some pouches from some Germans. And then there's a kit later on where I get a Stormcast because I want to do like a mechanised unit, and then that's a little bit more involved. But that's just the fun of it, right? Is you start off quite straightforward and work your way along. So I'm going to cover almost like beginner, intermediate, and then I say advanced. There are more advanced versions of kitbashing out there. So, but yeah, we'll start off simple with a head swap. So really, first of all, I'm just going to place a little bit of blue tack down and then just try a couple of different heads. So I've already got this German body built, straightforward build of a model. Doesn't matter which one you use, and then it's just a matter of trying different heads, see which one feels right. I quite like this Conquistador head. Kind of had the vibe of someone from the Swiss Guard or Papal States, which kind of feels right for a holy army. So that was a very strong option. So I quite like the look of that. And then the last one was using one of the Perry War the Roses heads. Again, I couldn't find enough sallet helms. I need more sallet helms, clearly. But I quite like this little helm. But in the end, I opted for the knight helmet. So just using a little bit of super glue. And then it's just a matter of just getting that position right. Sometimes one of the things you want to do is decide the direction of the head, because that can help influence a little bit of narrative in the model as well. So should they be looking down the barrel? Is he looking more around a corner? In the end, I opted for looking down the barrel because I thought it looked cooler. So yeah, quite like the look of that. I like the poncho, gives it a bit of extra cloth. But I did think we could do with some pouches, so just stuck some German pouches. So pretty much a German body with a knight helmet on it. Feels Iron Sultanate. I like it. So from the grand scheme of things, that was super straightforward, not very complex. It's literally having a fully built German soldier with a knight's head. And that knight's head was quite cool because it had a different vibe to it, because I usually use like the feudal knight's head that are more like bucket helms and stuff like that, and that one looked very different. The reason for using that is I wanted to try and push this guy into more like the Iron Sultanate vibe, so one of the Azebs, or I could use him as a Janissary or something like that. So when it comes to painting his robes and stuff, I won't go for traditional dirty, grimy German or khaki drabs of the Allied forces. Maybe I'll go for something a little bit more ostentatious, something a bit more Persian looking. I don't know, not decided, but that was super straightforward, simple head swap. Going to use him as an Iron Sultanate infantryman of some sort. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at kitbashing two kits together. So this is going to be some Agincourt foot knights. They're Perry Agincourt foot knights. Use them as French or British. And then I'm going to get myself some parts from the US Ranger set. I mean, any kind of World War II set or World War I set will do. I just have these at hand. And I did a little thing with the pouches to make them look like sort of shoulder pads and stuff. So I've got some pouches from the German set as well, because I've got a starter box set, which is around and about. And they're like the SMG pouches. So I'll cover that in the actual video. But yes, there's a couple of kits here, which is some World War II stuff and the Agincourt foot knights. So I'm now going to make some shock troopers or heavily armoured yeomanry. not decided. So first up, I just want to get a few bits and bobs off the sprue. So I'm just going to clip off some of these Agincourt French Knights and some swords as well. So they've got the swords and the scabbards. I thought it'd be quite a nice touch having that. They do actually have a belt that has like a void in it, so you probably will want to add some of those. Or you can always put pouches or holsters. It's entirely up to you. And then it's a matter of just cleaning off. I like to use a knife. I'm more comfortable using a knife, so I can just get around and get a smoother finish with that. Find all the bits that got mould lines. Sometimes you're going to miss some mould lines. Some mould lines are hidden. If they're hidden, don't worry about them, but do be careful. I like to cut towards myself. It's just because of the muscle memory, and I've been doing it for years. But if you don't like the idea of using a knife, get a file. The only downside to a file, sometimes it can leave like little rough marks, but if you get like different grains or grits of files, then you can get a bit more of a smoother finish. And of course, removing any chunky bits of sprue off these scabbards. They are quite flimsy and thin, so do be mindful not to slice into them. And then I'm after my more modern day or machine gun arms. So I've got a British paratrooper set here as opposed to Americans. I randomly had that. And then just getting some rifles and stuff. Some of them are in two parts, so one part holding one part of the rifle, the other part holding another. For test fitting, I always get myself a little bit of blue tack. There is going to be an extra bit of material there, I do know that, but it's usually for just checking poses, see if I like the idea if those arms go well with that body position. So here I'm just getting a little bit of blue tack, and then I'm like, do I have the machine gun more raised up, so it's like charging forwards, quite like that, or do I have it more of a casual kind of drop like that? And I actually preferred that more, so that's why I tend to do the blue tacking to start off with, just get an idea of pose, and then once I'm happy with that, I will then glue that on. Again, I'm expecting a little bit of a void here and there at the back or between the arm joints. That's fine, I can easily fix that with a little bit of super glue later once it's dry, and just fill it in. And again, bit of test fitting on the guy with the rifle. This is in two parts. Sometimes this can be a curse because it's a nightmare trying to align the two parts together, but usually when you're kit bashing, you get that little bit more freedom, especially if some waists are slightly larger than others, or you just want to have a bit of a play around with a cool pose. So it can be a blessing as well as a curse. But yeah, just gluing it on, as you can see, fiddly as hell, and I had a lot of fun trying to get that bit together and lined up, but once I did, I was happy enough with it. The only thing now is filling those voids at the back. Again, they're not huge voids, so you could use a little bit of filler, or what I'm doing here is just getting some super glue. Now, the downside with super glue is it will shrink in a little bit, which is fine. So I pour a little bit in, wipe any surface area to remove any bits and bobs that might be on the bits I don't want it to be on, and then do both arms, let it dry, or use some accelerant, and then just add a little bit more later. Sometimes you might find after you sprayed it, there's a little bit of a gap. You can always fix that later on, but yeah, just a little squirt of accelerant, not loads. And then of course I got his sword belt because it just droops down to a point there, so I want to get a sword on there, and that's great because you can play around with the pose of that as well, where it's hanging. Again, I like to fiddle around, like going, oh, I want it hanging this way. No, I'll have it hanging that way. Oh, maybe I'll have it hanging that way. So sometimes it can be a little bit fiddly. And then the other guy as well, I'm going to do the same for him, get his sword on there as well. Because these guys are shock troopers. I think they will be shock troopers. I want them to be a bit more elite and armed a bit better. So close combat weapons and machine guns. Now, one of the things I did enjoy doing was adding these submachine gun pouches. So you get like a couple of pouches with magazines in them. And they work really, really well for shoulder pauldrons. You could do them as waist armor as well, which is really nice. But yeah, quick clean up as just any little chunky bits of sprue, because they do get there. And one of the things I do is when I've got a sharp knife, like on a buckle, I just stab it ever so gently. So I'm holding it, a bit more accuracy going on here as well. And then the glue just pulls it away from the knife blade. It's just, as opposed to using big sausage fingers getting in the way and getting frustrated, it's just a really nice, accurate way of getting those bits attached. I do that all the time now. But yeah, I like shoulder pauldron pouches, works really well. And then of course it's adding the visor. Do you have the visor already down? Do you have it slightly lifted up? And that is some of the things you just play around with, like what kind of look do I want? Do I want him with it down? Is he charging forwards? Is he using a machine gun? Does he need to protect himself? I quite like the casual, slightly lifted up, makes him look a bit more badass, I think. But yeah, once that's glued on and I'm happy with it, because sometimes they can be quite fiddly. They are teeny tiny little bits of plastic, so there is a little bit of fiddling around and trying to get it central as well. That's something that I was faffing around a bit with. And on the other guy, I wanted it full face. Again, trying to get it central, trying to make it look right. And of course, adding some backpacks. Without the backpacks, they did look more like knights with machine guns. So sticking those backpacks on really did bring him more into that Trench Crusade kind of feel and vibe, for a better word. But I do like backpacks now with a little tea mug on my Agincourt Knights with machine guns and rifles. I think they look mega. There we go. Pretty badass looking dudes. Can't wait to paint them. Well, there we go. I mean, that was a little bit more involved than the very first one, which was a head swap. I mean, I pretty much built the foot knights. I mean, they come as a fully assembled body, head, legs. I just had to add a sword and then put some arms on. And the arms, at first, I was a bit like, there's some gaps here and there, but that's fine because I can fill them with super glue or I can fill them with filler or whatever. But a lot of the times, there's some cool arms where one is kind of like doing one thing and one is doing another. It's when you have like the arms where they work together, like they're holding a rifle or they're aiming down a gun or something like that, or they're in conjunction with something. And they're the ones that get a little bit more tricky, but actually most of the time you can fill the gaps or just file a little bit off. But I didn't really need to with these. They fit quite well. There's a little bit of gapping, like I said, but not a lot. And I really do like the idea of using those submachine gun sort of pouches as shoulder pads, because I can imagine there's some armor plating underneath that. No one sees that. I know it's there. But also it's easy access for troops around them as well as themselves, because they'll probably like magnetized, so they can easily just like take a bit off and take the magazine out and then stick it into their Thompson machine gun or their MP40 or whatever they're using. Maybe they've got some weird holy names nowadays, I don't know. And this is the thing with Trench Crusade. What I really like is the aesthetic, because I see knights, but I see knights with machine guns, and then sticking rucksacks on them and then those pouches around really do throw them into like a more, well, I say modernized sort of war machine kind of vibe, and I do quite like that. It's very different. So yeah, it's an interesting aesthetic. So what I'm going to do now is move on to something a little bit more involved, so a little bit more kit bashing, I guess, involved, or playing around with parts, so to speak. I'm going to do 2 different scales as well, which is not something that normally works when you do kit bashing. Depends on what you're trying to get, really. I mean, everything works if there's a reason for doing it. Now I'm going to make a mechanised infantry unit, which is an entry from the new Antioch warband list. They are larger mechanised suits. They have slightly enlarged superhumans inside of it, so that kind of makes sense. I mean, you could use a Space Marine, you can use what you want, but I quite like the sort of armoured knightly vibe that the Stormcast give off. Now, what I do need to do here is they have big guns, but I also like the idea of the shields. They're almost like as a palisade and stuff like that. So some of the things I want to get from this is make it look like it's not a Stormcast, move it away from that, but also still keep that sort of medieval knightly vibe, but give it a big whopping gun and a shield still. But obviously Stormcast shields have designs on it. We'll come to that. We're going to fix that. But yeah, mixing 2 scales together to make something a bit more bigger and bulkier. Sounds fun. So the first thing I'm going to do is just assemble the Stormcast as it is. Now, it's one of those push-fit ones from the starter box set, so that's fine. I do like the new Thunderstrike Stormcast. I think they've got nice looking knight armour, so just a matter of just assembling that as it should be. And then just test fitting a head, see if it's the right kind of scale before I get too ahead of myself. And I was happy enough with that Victrix knightly head. So I was like, cool, let's clip off the hammer. I could have opted for 2 hammers, so could have like a sword in one hand maybe, and then a gun in the other. But I like the idea of using a big palisade shield, and these Stormcasts have big ones. So it was just a matter of slowly whittling away that shield design. Now, I'm very mindful that I'm cutting towards myself here. I've been doing this for years. It's lots of little micro movements, and it's actually safer than cutting away, I've found, because the muscle memory is not there for that. And then just using a file to buff down any edges if it just needs a little bit more finesse on that paneling or that shield surface. Once that's happy enough with that part of the build, is a matter of finding some weaponry. Now, I've got all sorts of like kits with guns, and I quite like this squat kit because they've got nice drum mags and stuff like that. Now, there is a hand attached to the gun, but it wasn't the right kind of pose and angle, so the fitting just didn't work. It didn't look right, so I decided to cut that off and then do it as like an underslung machine gun, heavy machine gun that would go underneath his arm. So I just need to cut that hand off, which I do, so give it a little bit of a clean up as well. So just remove any like excess bits you don't need, check out for any mold lines and stuff like that. If you really want to drill your barrels. Now, Stormcast on their van braces have like a couple of little straps, and I thought that's quite cool. Looks like he's actually strapped to the gun, so that makes a lot of sense. So it's more of a casual hanging down to the side. So it's just a matter of just gluing that gun to his arm and just aligning it, just so it looked a little bit more. I mean, I could get some plastic card and make some straps, but I'm making this simple for myself as well as for you guys. So I was happy enough with that, but I felt like it just was a bit of a just looks like I've stuck a gun on. So I want to get some hydraulics or some kind of like other details to make it feel a little bit more like it's part of the arm. So his arm actually has the gun fully attached to it. Now on the actual sprue for the squats, there was like some hydraulics. I decided I'll just attach those to the shoulder as well, so it looked like it's got like a piston attached to it, very steampunky. So I got that glued on. Again, a lot of that is just dry fitting, making sure it looks fine, getting the angle right, maybe cutting a few bits to shape. Again, there's a little bit more time involved in doing this kind of side of stuff. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a mechanic, I don't know how this stuff works, but I went with a rule of cool, and that's the most important part, is just go for something that looks right, glue it on, and then it's science, innit? It's weird pseudoscience. That's how I've described it to myself anyway, to make myself sleep at night. Now on my Orlock sprue, there's like some cool sort of like strapping and hydraulics for one of the options for your gangers, and I thought, well, that'll be quite cool. I see if that harness will work over the arm. Now it's a different shape, obviously it's designed for a different kit entirely, but just with a little bit of bending and a little bit of like just repositioning, I actually quite like the look of it, as if it's like all part of the hydraulic system that allows that big heavy gun to be moved around on the armoured arm. So there was a little bit of just like moving it around, testing it, trying an angle, cutting like a little bit off here and there, but in the end I quite like the actual end result of it, and it worked for me. Again, a little bit of bending, not too much because you don't want to break it, but that's sometimes the part and parcel of doing the kit bashing. You find a part you really like that, and sometimes you do have to manipulate it to fit the thing you want. There's also the danger, if it goes horribly wrong, you've lost that part for good now, because you know it's the only one you've got, and that is sometimes the excitement and the danger. It's a double-edged sword when it comes to kit bashing. You've got a cool piece, and if it goes wrong, you no longer have that cool piece. I did use my knife just to bend in some of those straps a little bit more, so it looked like it was closer to the joins and stuff. But yeah, really pleased with that. Very straightforward, very simple. A little bit of cleaning here and there. There was a couple of like little bits of sprue still stuck on there, and then I decided to glue the head on. So again, this is the important part, is where the head's facing, what kind of story or narrative you're telling with this guy as they're advancing forwards. Are they looking to the left, are they looking to the right? Usually where the body's swinging, that kind of helps. I want the head to turn with how the body's moving. So yeah, just get some glue, slap it in, stick the head on. Now it has a very different head joint than the actual Stormcast, but with it super glued in and you've got like the gorget around its face, it kind of works quite nicely. It's just like a really heavily armoured mechanised infantry unit. I also decided I wanted to stick loads of pouches on this guy. I did a test a while back, which has been painted and used for the 360s beforehand. It was very evident it needed some more pouches on it, so that's what I'm doing here. Inspired by the Necromunda in Forces, because they have like pouch on the back that their buddies can use, it kind of felt right that this guy will do a little bit of the heavy lifting for supplies, ammo. There was a nice little bag being carried by one of the American arms, so I just decided to cut the straps off because it was like the right shape as well. There's a nice little void. I was like, oh, I need something to go in that void, and that was like the perfect shape. So I decided just to cut the straps off, push it in, and yeah, I was happy enough with that. I mean, it's very asymmetrical. I don't want it to look like a normal symmetrical rucksack or satchel. It's like all these things are strapped to it or magnetized to it or whatever. And I want it to look a little bit more ad hoc, and then of course some extra bits on the shoulders. Maybe there's grenades in there, maybe there's more ammo, maybe it's rations, who knows. His mates would just climb on the back of him and get those things off. Some more pouches around the side. I just felt it looked a bit more like he was on campaign. And then I just needed to glue my models to bases. So what I tend to do is just do a couple of dollops of super glue on the actual bases and then push the models down. And because they're on those little puddle bases, when you press down you get a nice little bit of glue coming around. It gives it a nice seal as well. Got a couple of extra guys built there as well, with different heads and arms, just because I could. Just got carried away building random dudes. So there's our mechanised infantry unit now done. Very chuffed with that. I do like the idea of sticking all those pouches on the back so that the troops can access them as well. I think that's quite fun. Stole that from like the Palanite Enforcers from Necromunda. It kind of makes sense because it is like a tank unit almost, not like a physical tank, but like, you know, they're quite bulky. They do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to the shooting and the killing. So with all that hydraulic and heavy armor, it makes sense that they should carry some extra supplies for the troops. I mean, they're supporting the troops in multiple ways, morally, physically, and you know, they've got all the gear in there, the tea and the biscuits when they have a break. But I do like the idea of keeping the shields and just filing those down. Something about using a knife, you'll see this, and I do mention it already, but it is something I've developed over years, that kind of like cutting towards myself. I know a lot of these sort of health and safety gurus say cut away from yourself, but I find it's harder when I'm cutting away, and it's less accurate, and I damage the kits more. Whereas I do these little micro movements towards myself, I rarely cut myself, except when I have like a new blade or something like that. I've been doing this for decades, and I've got that muscle memory to be able to do that. I wouldn't recommend it. I'd still probably cut away to start off with, but it's something that I've developed and I'm very comfortable doing. So that is a bit of a disclaimer out there going, someone in the comments probably going to mention that I'm cutting wrong. Also with accelerant, it is quite stinky stuff, so I do have a ventilated area when you are using super glue and accelerant. That is something to bear in mind as well. But also, if you do get anything on your fingers, give it a good wash. Most of the stuff I did here was just little squirts, which were, although the camera looks like it's at my fingers, it's not. It's weird. So there we are. There's 3 levels of doing some kit bashing: simple head swap, using 2 different kits, and then using multiple scales as well, and then just playing around and sticking bits on and test fitting and trying stuff. And as you can see, when they're painted, this is my personal stuff coming up right now. They tie in quite well. They look all right, and you don't tend to see those parts that are separate. It kind of camouflages the kit bashing almost. Once you've done your thing and you started actually covering them in colour, it then ceases to look like loads of separate random bits just stuck on. Again, that is testament to what kind of parts you're using as well and where you're sourcing them from. So one of the units I've got here is my yeomanry. Now I'm using couple of kits for these. These are Franco-Prussian War infantry, the Prussian infantry themselves. I quite like the look of them. I like that whole idea of like the bedroll or the greatcoat going across their waist or shoulders. And then it's a simple head swap. So I've used a War the Roses English head, quite nice. They've got that helmeted knightly vibe, and then some World War II arms, again using that same American Ranger set that I've been using already. And this is the great thing, it's like one set, because I've already built like a bunch of Rangers for my bolt action stuff, so I get loads of arms spare, and I get loads of heads, and I get loads of pouches spare, and that's the great thing. So I put them all in bags and I keep them obviously to the side and then use them for other projects later on down the line, and this has been perfect for that. So I like my yeomanry. I've got this guy here who's going to be my sniper priest. Now sniper priests don't actually look down the sight, apparently they just use faith, but I've got him looking down the sight because I didn't read that part when I built him. I just I like the idea of a priest that does sniping. I gave him a hooded head. The hooded head is one of the Oathmark human infantry, and then it's a War of the Roses dude, because again I've got my medieval stuff I've been building, I've got my World War II stuff I've been building, and then if you have seen the channel, you know I've got lots of Frostgrave and whatever bits and bobs. So that's just a mishmash. And also interesting to see that the Frostgrave heads also scale quite well with these things as well. And then this other guy in charge there, he's my officer, or yeah, lieutenant I think they are. They go on larger bases, they go on 32mm rounds. It kind of does feel a little bit sort of like, oh, that's a big base, I've got a lot of space around me. I don't know why he sounds like that, he just does. That's how he talks. Also, when you are building, just check those playtest rules if you are doing stuff for Trench Crusade, just to make sure you've got the right base sizes, because some things go on 32s, some things go on 40s, and then it seems like most of them go on 25s. So do check when you are building the units, because last thing you want to do is spend ages like clipping them off bases. Just gets annoying. But yeah, remember, there are a metric ton of kits available out there. Certainly for historicals, there is so much 28mm stuff that you can use when you are, certainly if you're doing something Trench Crusade, or even if you're going down the route of Silver Bayonet, there is so much choice. When you look at like workshop stuff, you got lots of factions and things, but they are obviously all scaled within themselves. And then if you're lucky, you get like your third-party 3D printers that you can get bits. Again, you need a printer for that. But yeah, across the board of historicals, there is a metric ton of plastic. And like I said, their arms tend to fit very similarly. The heads, most of them tend to fit. There might be a little bit of gluing involved, or a little bit of filling, or rolling up a little ball of blue tack or something like that and using that as a neck joint. But for the most part, they all scale very well, especially when it comes to like hand swaps. If you want, like, I want my commander to have a gladius from a Roman soldier, the hands are going to be the same size. 9 times out of 10, hands are going to be the same size, which is great. But yeah, if you've got any kits that you really like, do throw them into the comments. What like your top tips or your top kits, top tips and top kits would be for anyone that's starting off on this kit bashing journey as well. And also things that you're proud of, like a really good kit bash that you've tried. And by all means, you know, send people towards your Instagrams as well, so they can see the pictures of the shiny things that you've done. But as always, I can't not go without saying goodbye to these beautiful people. I've not kitbashed any of these. These are real people's names. I didn't make the names up. They are people that have joined the Patreon. And I have a beautiful, beautiful community on the Patreon. If you do want to join a beautiful, beautiful community, it is worth joining the Patreon. The Discord level is quite low from as tiers point of views go. And then they increase up after that, including some one-to-one. So if you want some one-to-one tuition on how to kitbash, may consider doing that. It's entirely up to you. But I'm going to go off now and eat some mince pies because it is the start of Christmas. I feel very festive. I mean, look at me. I've got my Christmas jumper on. I've got Christmas trees. I love Christmas. Christmas is my favourite time of the year. Some people hate it. I don't mind Mariah Carey being defrosted at this time of year and brought back out again. She's my favourite, mostly because my brother used to play her over and over and over and over because he was a fan of Mariah Carey. So I had to just endure that. And the cause. I'm going off on tangent. Mrs. Peach is probably like, what are you going on about right now? Stop talking. But yeah, Christmas is coming, folks. Christmas is coming. Holidays are coming. I'm going. Bye. Bye-bye. I just want to basically give enough time for these names to go by. I could start them earlier, I suppose, but I just like waffling and talking about stuff. But yeah, bye. Mwah.